What happens when the system meant to protect our most vulnerable fails catastrophically? Imagine a cold December morning in 2012. Emergency responders rush into a small, cramped house where a 13-month-old baby girl lies unresponsive. What medical examiners discover in the hours that follow will send shockwaves through an entire community and expose a horrifying truth that authorities would desperately try to conceal. Some stories are almost too painful to tell. Stories that make us question the very foundations of our justice system. Stories that demand to be heard, no matter how difficult. This is one such story. This is the devastating case of Poppy Worthington, a beautiful baby girl whose short life ended under suspicious circumstances that would eventually point to an unimaginable betrayal by the one person who should have protected her most. The evidence I'm about to share will leave even seasoned investigators speechless. The failures of the justice system will make your blood boil. And the fight for truth will keep you watching until the very end. But I must warn you, this investigation contains deeply disturbing details about violence and cruelty toward a child. If you find such content difficult to process, please proceed with caution. Before we continue with this heart-wrenching story, I want to thank you for being part of our growing community of justice seekers. Your support allows these stories to be heard and ensures victims like Poppy are never forgotten. If you're new here, please subscribe to Disturbing True Crime Stories and hit the notification bell. Each subscription brings us one step closer to shining light on cases that deserve attention. If you share this mission to fight for justice for children who've suffered abuse, please consider becoming a channel sponsor. Every contribution enables me to continue this important work, uncovering dark stories that might otherwise remain hidden. Only together can we achieve justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Poppy Worthington came into this world on October 20, 2011, in the northern English town of Barrow. Her mother's identity was carefully protected by law, along with those of Poppy's siblings, with courts banning publication of this information even after the little girl's tragic death. What we do know paints a troubling picture of Poppy's early life. Her mother struggled with serious psychological problems, having grown up in a violent household where children weren't properly cared for. Police and social service reports described her as someone deeply scarred by her own difficult childhood. These emotional wounds made it nearly impossible for her to provide the stable, nurturing environment her own children desperately needed. Paul Worthington, Poppy's father, was significantly older than her mother, 48 years old when his daughter died. He worked at a local supermarket and had previous interactions with social services, though his case had been closed in 2003. A crucial detail that would later prove significant: Paul had previously dated a woman who authorities suspected of mistreating Poppy's mother. Shockingly, nobody investigated this disturbing connection before tragedy struck. Little Poppy was born into a complex family structure as the sixth child. Her mother already had 3 daughters from previous relationships, while with Paul, she had a son and then twins, Poppy and her brother. The relationship between the parents was turbulent and unpredictable, with Paul frequently abandoning the home for weeks before returning. The children lived in constant uncertainty, never knowing what each day might bring. Social workers were aware of problems in Poppy's mother's family even before the little girl was born. Despite this knowledge, they inexplicably stopped monitoring the situation in 2007, 5 years before Poppy's death. They turned a blind eye to obvious red flags: overcrowded housing, the mother's mental health challenges, the father's instability. No one checked how these vulnerable children were living. The family's living conditions were appalling by any standard. 8 people crammed into a small 3-bedroom house rented from Paul's sister Tracy. Downstairs consisted of just a living room and kitchen. Upstairs, 3 small bedrooms had to accommodate everyone. The parents shared one room with 2 cribs for the boys. Poppy slept in a crib in another room, sometimes with one of her older sisters. The remaining children were squeezed into the 3rd bedroom. The mother described their home as constantly noisy, not just from 6 children but also from a steady stream of visitors. Yet bizarrely, neighbors later claimed they didn't even realize anyone lived in the house. Some even thought it was abandoned or used for drug activities. This strange disconnect between the chaotic reality inside and the apparent emptiness observed from outside would later raise troubling questions. Despite these challenging circumstances, Poppy's mother painted a picture of a vibrant, sociable little girl who loved being the center of attention. Poppy would wake up early each morning, happily rousing the entire household. Unlike her twin brother, she was born without complications and developed normally, beginning to walk shortly before her death. During her brief life, she experienced only minor health issues, a night in the hospital with bronchitis, eye inflammation, and what was believed to be chickenpox. In December 2012, the family was planning to relocate to another area for a fresh start. But Poppy would never get that chance. December 11, 2012, began as an ordinary day, with Poppy showing only mild symptoms of a cold. But there were warning signs that everyone missed, signs that might have saved her life if properly addressed. During lunch that day, Poppy suddenly began screaming while in her high chair, arching her back in obvious pain. Her mother picked her up and started rubbing her stomach, assuming the child was experiencing typical digestive discomfort. Minutes later, Poppy suffered severe diarrhea, which her mother later described as brick red in color. This alarming symptom, a potential indicator of internal bleeding, went tragically unheeded. That evening, between 7 o'clock and 7:30, Poppy's mother put her to bed. By 8 p.m., all the children in the household were asleep. Poppy's mother remained downstairs watching television, while around 9 p.m., Paul Worthington went upstairs with his laptop. According to his account, he checked sports betting results, watched pornography, and then fell asleep. At approximately 2 a.m., the mother went upstairs to retrieve the laptop for herself. What happened in the hours that followed would become the subject of intense scrutiny and contradicting accounts. Paul claimed he awoke early in the morning to Poppy's screams. When he entered her room, he found her tense and crying. He brought her to his bed to comfort her, noticing she smelled. He claimed he went downstairs for a clean diaper, and when he returned, Poppy appeared to be asleep. However, when he touched her arm moments later, he discovered she was limp and unresponsive. He frantically ran downstairs with the child in his arms, shouting for her mother to call an ambulance. Here's where the first deeply troubling detail emerges. When Paul brought Poppy downstairs, the little girl wasn't wearing the bottom part of her pajamas. This critical circumstance, which would later raise serious suspicions about what really happened that night, wasn't properly investigated at the time. At 5:56 a.m., the mother called the emergency number 999. The ambulance arrived at 6:05 a.m. Paramedics immediately recognized the gravity of Poppy's condition, describing her as pale, waxy, and not breathing. Friends, I need to pause here for a moment. What I'm about to share next shocked even seasoned investigators. The evidence discovered in little Poppy's case will leave you speechless. If you're following this story closely, please leave a comment below with just one word describing how you feel right now. The overwhelming emotions this case triggers are something we all need to process together as a community fighting for justice for children. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do it right now. Like this video and share it with everyone you know. This way, little Poppy's story will never be forgotten and will always live in our hearts. Every like and subscription makes us stronger in fighting for justice for children like Poppy. For 57 agonizing minutes, medical professionals fought desperately to save Poppy's life. Their efforts were in vain. At 7:07 a.m., she was declared dead. When they moved her tiny body, medical staff observed something horrifying: blood seeping from her. This immediately raised alarm bells about the true nature of what had happened to this innocent child. The doctor who battled to save Poppy's life later stated that her injuries were unlike anything he had ever seen before. These words from an experienced medical professional speak volumes about the horrific nature of the trauma inflicted on this helpless baby girl. What followed was a masterclass in investigative failure. From the very beginning, crucial mistakes compromised the entire case. Paul Worthington was permitted to use the bathroom unaccompanied, where he could potentially wash away vital biological evidence. Swabs from his body weren't collected until late that evening, hours after the critical window for gathering forensic evidence had closed. The crime scene wasn't properly secured. Essential evidence, the paramedics' gloves, sheets from the stretcher, Poppy's clothes, her last diaper, all disappeared or were discarded. Even Paul's laptop, which he had used that fateful night and which could have provided critical timeline evidence, vanished. Police later claimed he sold it to a friend, but they never managed to locate it. In a particularly devastating blow to the investigation, Poppy's paternal aunt, Tracy Worthington, found the girl's diaper on the floor near the fireplace and threw it away due to the strong smell. This crucial piece of evidence was never recovered from the trash. The investigation was further compromised when, at a meeting on the day of Poppy's death, a pediatrician incorrectly stated that the girl suffered from chronic constipation, which could explain the bleeding. This false information steered investigators away from the truth during those critical early hours. On December 14, Poppy's body was transferred to the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital. X-rays revealed 2 broken bones in one of her legs, an injury that neither parent claimed any knowledge of. 5 days later, 2 pathologists, Dr. Alison Armour and Dr. Stephanie Beattie, performed an autopsy. What Dr. Armour discovered was devastating. She found bruises and tissue tears indicating sexual assault. She also identified hemorrhaging in Poppy's chest and throat. These findings so disturbed the experienced pathologist that she immediately contacted investigator Amanda Sadler to report that Poppy had been assaulted. On December 24, she called again, stating unequivocally that the girl died from violent actions, not natural causes. Despite the gravity of these accusations, Senior Officer Mike Forrester inexplicably refused to authorize additional forensic tests, limiting testing to just Poppy's blood analysis. Dr. Armour only completed her report 6 months later, explaining that she wanted to have all laboratory results before reaching an official conclusion. In 2013, forensic tests revealed that Poppy's DNA was present on an intimate part of Paul Worthington's body. However, because the samples were taken too late, the concentration wasn't sufficient for conclusive findings. Paul's defense team seized on this uncertainty, claiming the DNA could have been transferred secondarily from his hands. Despite clear indications of sexual assault, Cumbria police failed to bring in a pediatric specialist in child sexual abuse investigations. Even more shockingly, the remaining 5 children weren't removed from the family until November 2013, almost a year after Poppy's death. I know this story is difficult to hear, but please stay with me. The most shocking revelations are yet to come, including how this case would eventually expose catastrophic failures at every level of the system meant to protect children like Poppy. If this story moves you as deeply as it does me, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support ensures that we can continue bringing these important stories to light. After watching, I'd love to know what time of day you're watching and which city you're from. Please share this in the comments. It helps me understand when and where my viewers are connecting with these crucial stories. Thank you for your continued support. Every subscription, every like, every share brings us one step closer to justice for children who can no longer speak for themselves. On March 28, 2014, the High Court in London conducted a thorough 2-week hearing into Poppy's death. Judge Peter Jackson made a devastating determination: Poppy died as a result of a penetrating assault by her father. The judge didn't mince words in his criticism, condemning the actions of the police, social services, and the coroner for their mishandling of this tragic case. Following this verdict, the police officers involved were removed from their positions, and the Independent Police Complaints Commission launched an investigation. Yet despite these developments, the official inquest held on October 21 lasted a mere 7 minutes, with virtually no details about Poppy's death provided to the public. On January 16, 2015, the Crown Prosecution Service made a shocking announcement: there wasn't enough evidence to bring criminal charges against Paul Worthington. Despite a high court judge's finding that he had sexually assaulted his daughter, Paul would remain free. A subsequent inquest in November of that same year confirmed Judge Jackson's findings, but still, Paul was never held legally accountable for his actions. Through all this, Paul's family steadfastly defended him. His sister Tracy vehemently proclaimed his innocence in media interviews. "He wouldn't know his children. He lived with me for 2 years and looked after my kids. Would you think he'd still be walking this planet if I thought he was a peddle? No, he wouldn't, 'cause I'd make sure he wasn't. I've got 2 girls, and trust me, he isn't like that." When confronted about the police investigation, Tracy's frustration boiled over. "Well, there you go, that's my reaction. It's a joke, an absolute joke. It's been a joke from start to finish." When pressed about Dr. Armour's professional opinion that Poppy had suffered a serious sexual assault, Tracy dismissed it outright. "I don't care what Dr. Armour said and what she thinks. We're all different." She didn't. Asked directly if her brother was a child abuser, Tracy was adamant, "No, he's not. If he was a child abuser, do you think I'd let him walk? No, 'cause I don't like him myself. So you really think I would back him up if I thought he was a child abuser?" Kelly Grieve, a medical worker who cared for the parents at the hospital, recorded their initial explanations. According to Paul, Poppy woke up crying during the night, and he put her in his bed to comfort her. He noticed she smelled and went downstairs for a clean diaper. When he returned, she was already asleep, but minutes later, he discovered she wasn't breathing. The mother told Grieve that all the children in the house had been sick before the tragedy. She mentioned that Poppy looked like she needed to empty her bowels, and Paul checked her diaper to see if it was full. A particularly troubling aspect was the serious contradictions between different versions of events. Poppy's Aunt Tracy claimed that when she arrived at the house after Poppy was taken away, the mother told her an entirely different story. In this version, Paul went downstairs not for a diaper but for a bottle for Poppy. Then he came back upstairs, laid the girl down, and started rubbing her back. Such discrepancies only intensified investigators' suspicions. Friends, please don't leave this video, as the story isn't over yet. In a few minutes, I'll share another very important aspect of this case that needs to be heard by society. The memory of these tragedies shouldn't be forgotten. I've noticed that a very large percentage of viewers watch my videos without subscribing to the channel, which negatively affects our reach. Please check if you're subscribed. Creating these stories requires extensive research and dedication, and your subscription, like, and comment show that this work matters. Only your support helps me continue covering these important topics for society. Despite a total of 5 investigations into Poppy's death, no one was ever held accountable. Legal shortcomings, destroyed evidence, and delays in the investigation allowed those responsible to escape justice. Poppy's tiny body was buried on February 19, 2013, in an unmarked grave covered with toys and flowers. Paul Worthington went into hiding after receiving numerous death threats. Reports indicate he's living under a new identity, his whereabouts unknown. In a particularly disturbing development, in 2018, 6 years after Poppy's death, Paul left a birthday card on her grave saying, "You are always in my thoughts. Have a beautiful birthday playing with all the other special boys and girls up there. Daddy." These words from a man who a court determined had sexually assaulted his own daughter provoke nothing but disgust and further highlight the tragedy of justice denied. The story of Poppy Worthington transcends the details of a shocking crime. It stands as a devastating indictment of systemic failures in protecting society's most vulnerable members. It shows how justice doesn't always prevail, even when evidence points clearly to the truth. If you believe such stories need to be told, please like and share this video. Only together can we make a difference and prevent similar tragedies from happening again. Before I end today's video, I want to tell you about another heartbreaking case that deserves our attention. In Christmas of 2011, in the small town of Waterville, Maine, no one could have predicted that this holiday would forever change the life of an entire community. A 20-month-old Isla with an angelic smile and blue eyes vanished from her own crib. When police found traces of blood, the case took a chilling turn that shocked all of America. Isla's story, like Poppy's, is a tale of a system that failed the very child it was meant to protect. I want to remind you that you can support my channel with a subscription. Your support helps me create more in-depth investigations and uncover the terrible secrets behind these tragic cases. I would be incredibly grateful if you would like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new investigations. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to everyone who watched this video to the end. Your commitment to these stories ensures that children like Poppy and Isla are never forgotten. Every like, comment, and subscription strengthens our community dedicated to seeking justice for the most vulnerable victims. Together, we can make a difference.